My name is Noah, and I used to think I had a normal life until I opened a closet that was never meant for me. After Dad vanished one late autumn evening without a word or a goodbye, it was just Mom and me in that aging colonial house on Sunset Ridge. She changed after that. Not in a loud or angry way. In fact, she became quieter. More watchful. Always tidying up. Always humming sad songs she claimed were lullabies. She smiled at me, but it never reached her eyes. By the time I was 10, we had routines: tidy breakfast, school, homework, dinner, then TV reruns from the 80s. Mom insisted I take daily vitamins she said were for growth and strength, and I never questioned it. What child would? One Saturday morning, when I was helping her fold laundry in the living room, I noticed something different. The textures of her clothing intrigued me. Not in a way I could explain. Her long, flowing blouses, satiny slips, even the shimmer of her tights, they looked soft, delicate, almost otherworldly. I looked down at my own rough cargo pants and Batman tee, and suddenly felt like I was a guest in someone else's skin. Later that evening, while taking a bath, I spotted a pair of tan stockings hanging from the shower rod. When I asked why they were so thin and why they always seemed to rip, she laughed and said, "It's a woman thing, baby. You don't need to worry about it." But I did. I thought about it all night. The next week, I came home early from school. The house was quiet. Mom was still at the library where she worked. The front hallway light cast long shadows across the carpet. And for reasons I still can't explain, I walked straight into her bedroom. Her closet door was open, just slightly, like it had been waiting for me. I hesitated. My heart pounded. But something, curiosity, destiny, something pulled me closer. Inside the closet was more than just clothing. There were rows of neat boxes, each labeled in handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened one. It was full of delicate underthings, shimmering fabrics, lace, velvet, and a faint, powdery smell that made me feel safe and nostalgic, like remembering a dream I never lived. Before I knew it, I had slipped into one of her camisoles and a pair of silky shorts. They felt strange, but not wrong. I stood in front of her mirror, not expecting what I saw. I looked like someone who didn't hate their reflection. Then I heard the front door. Panic. I tore the camisole off, tripping over a box in the process. My knee hit the floor. I tried to stuff everything back into the drawer, but then she was there, frozen in the doorway, staring at me. Her eyes went from wide to unreadable. I couldn't speak. My face burned. My hands still smelled like her perfume. I wanted to vanish into the carpet. She didn't say a word. She just turned and left the room. That night, we ate in silence. Mac and cheese. No conversation. Not even eye contact. But I couldn't forget the way she looked at me, not angry. Not disappointed. Something else. Something I wouldn't understand until much later. A year passed. She never brought it up. Neither did I. But something changed. One day in the garage, I went digging for a Halloween costume box and stumbled upon something completely different. Hidden behind a stack of paint cans was a trunk. Inside? Skirts. Dresses. Girdles. Stockings. Bras. Accessories. And a small, pink notebook with my name on the inside cover. It wasn't mine, but it was about me. Notes. Measurements. Schedules. And a line that made my chest feel tight. Noah prefers soft textures and looks happiest in blush tones. I wasn't just curious anymore. I was a character in someone else's story, and that story had already been written. And that's when Mom walked in again. This time, she didn't leave. She closed the garage door behind her with a soft click. There was nowhere to run this time. I stood, clutching the pink notebook like it was radioactive. My mind scrambled for excuses, but my mouth just trembled. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just sat down on the garage steps, brushed sawdust off her jeans, and said, "You were never supposed to find that." Not yet. I blinked. What is this? She looked tired. Not old, tired in the way people look when they've been carrying something too heavy for too long. That notebook was my way of understanding you. Of preparing, in case the time ever came. My hands were shaking. Preparing for what? She didn't answer that. Instead, She stood up, walked over to me, and reached for the notebook. Come inside. We need to talk. We sat at the kitchen table, the one with scratches from when I'd spilled paint water on it as a kid. She poured 2 glasses of orange juice, like we were about to discuss the weather. Then she looked at me with eyes so gentle they nearly broke me. Noah, she said, do you remember the day you asked about my stockings? I nodded, confused. I knew then. I think. I've always known. There's something inside you that doesn't fit the box you were handed. I tried to speak, but all that came out was, I'm sorry. She touched my hand. Don't apologize. Just be honest. Do you like wearing my clothes? I felt heat rise up my neck. I wanted to vanish. But after what she said, I couldn't lie anymore. I nodded. Yes. I don't know why, but I feel different. Like I can breathe when I wear them. Like I'm closer to someone I've never met but always been. Her eyes welled with tears. She smiled through them. That's more honest than most adults can be. That night, she made grilled cheese sandwiches and promised we'd talk more soon. But things did change. She didn't say anything when I lingered in the women's section at the department store. She didn't flinch when I asked for longer conditioner for my hair. And the vitamins? They changed. No longer chewable dinosaur shapes, now they were gel capsules, taken each morning with my cereal and a side of scrambled eggs. They're to help your body adjust to growth, she said with a smile. You're blooming. I didn't understand at first. But within months, the changes began. My classmates didn't notice at first. I was already quiet, soft-spoken, better at painting than basketball. But I noticed. My chest started to feel sore. My hips, just slightly, began to curve in the mirror. And my voice, while never deep, stopped shifting the way the boys' voices did. If anything, it stayed exactly the same. I asked Mom one morning, why does my t-shirt feel tight? She sipped her coffee, not even looking up. Because your body is starting to match your soul. What does that mean? She smiled. You'll understand when you're ready. And when you are, you'll have the words for it. By the time I was 13, something else changed, not on the outside, but inside me. I stopped feeling like I was pretending when I wore her clothes. I started feeling like I was pretending when I didn't. There was a word for it that I'd read in a magazine hidden at the school library. Transgender. I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Not yet. But I could feel it in my bones. The thing that scared me most? I wasn't scared. What terrified me more was how right it all felt. But then, the biggest twist came, the one I wasn't prepared for. One night, Mom brought me into what used to be the guest room. The whole space had changed. The walls were now a soft lilac. The bed had floral bedding. A vanity sat in the corner, surrounded by lights. And next to it, a brand new wardrobe. Dresses, blouses, shoes, jewelry, makeup. And in the corner, a wig stand. I turned to her, completely speechless. She gently pulled a small envelope from her cardigan and handed it to me. Inside was a name tag. It read, Skylar, she/her. I dropped the envelope. I didn't. I never told you that name. She smiled. You didn't have to. You used to name your doll Skylar. You wrote it in your sketchbooks. You signed your digital art with it when you thought I wasn't looking. I collapsed into her arms, sobbing harder than I ever had in my life. She held me and whispered, I never wanted a son, Noah. I wanted you. And I think I always knew who that really was. That night was the first time I fell asleep, not feeling like an imposter in my own body. The mirror in the lilac room didn't lie to me. It didn't taunt me. For once, it just reflected me, Skylar. That name no longer felt like a fantasy scribbled into old sketchbooks. It felt like a truth finally spoken aloud, even if only between my mother and me. Mom began using Skylar at home. She didn't force it. She waited for me to nod each time, to confirm I was ready to hear it. Eventually, it felt like music. Like the name had always been mine, just waiting for the world to catch up. I kept living 2 lives. At school, I was still Noah. Baggy jeans, loose hoodies, a nervous smile. But when I got home, I slipped out of my costume, because that's what boyhood had become, and into the world of Skylar. She was graceful, curious, talkative, honest. She danced in the living room with bare feet and lip gloss. She stayed up late sketching dresses and watching makeup tutorials on mute when Mom fell asleep. One afternoon, Mom surprised me by offering to take a trip, not a big vacation, just a weekend in a town 2 hours away. We'll get a hotel. Go shopping. You can be whoever you want there. It was the first time I walked outside a building wearing a sundress. Just a hotel parking lot, but to me, it felt like Times Square. No one pointed. No one stared. Mom even asked someone to take a photo of us in front of a fountain. She posted it to a Facebook account she created under the name Skylar. A new identity. A hidden world. But the cracks were coming. And they began at school. At 13, I couldn't keep hiding the physical changes. My chest had taken on a visible curve, enough that I had to wear compression gear to hide it. My voice stayed soft. And my hips, they betrayed me more than anything else. Whispers started in gym class. Someone said, "Why does Noah wear a bra?" Another boy asked me why I walked like a girl. Then came the worst day. The school nurse called me in just to chat. She said she had concerns. She'd overheard something about medication, vitamins, physical changes. I panicked and told her they were just supplements from the health store. She didn't believe me. I didn't realize until I got home that she'd called my mother. Mom was waiting for me at the kitchen table again. Only this time, she looked scared. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. But she was quiet for a long time. Then she finally spoke. I knew this day was coming. I sat down. What did she say? She suspects I'm giving you hormone treatment. I froze. Are you? Mom looked me in the eyes. Do you want the truth? I nodded. She stood up, walked to the pantry, and pulled out the familiar bottle of vitamins. Except this one had no label. She handed it to me. I've been giving you low-dose blockers for almost 2 years. Supplements from a clinic a friend of mine runs out of state. Nothing dangerous, nothing irreversible, but enough to give you a head start, in case this was truly your path. I didn't know what to say. All I could think was, she saw me before I did. The next week, things exploded. One of the boys from school had followed me home and saw me through the living room window dressed as Skylar. By Monday, my locker had been vandalized. People whispered in the halls. Someone wrote "he-s-g" in Sharpie on my desk. I wanted to disappear. But when I came home crying that day, Mom didn't just comfort me. She stood up. I'm calling the school. No. I panicked. That'll just make it worse. But she didn't listen. She went full warrior. She didn't demand they accept Skylar, just that they protect a student, her child, from bullying and harassment. She threatened legal action. The principal caved fast. But it wasn't enough. I didn't want to hide anymore. And I didn't want to be a symbol either. I just wanted to be. A week later, I made my decision. At the school assembly, where students were invited to share stories about identity and courage, I raised my hand. I walked onto the stage, trembling. I looked out at hundreds of faces, some cruel, some confused, and a few that looked unexpectedly kind. And I said, my name is Skylar. I'm not confused. I'm not pretending. I'm just finally being who I am. And if you can't accept that, at least respect it. Silence. Then one girl clapped. Then another. Then the librarian. Then, most of the auditorium. The principal was white as a ghost. But he clapped too. After the assembly, something strange happened. I started being seen. Not as a target. Not as a freak. But as Skylar. Sure, there were whispers. Teachers still stumbled on pronouns. Some boys avoided me like I carried lightning in my pockets. But a few brave souls came forward, classmates I'd barely spoken to before, and said things like, "You were so brave up there." I wish I could be that honest about who I am. Skylar suits you. I began wearing clothes that fit my body, not the body people expected to see. Mom helped me update school records. We started therapy at a nearby clinic. She even got me an appointment at a gender wellness center 2 towns over. I was finally stepping into the life that had once only existed in mirrors and daydreams. But just as the world was opening up to me, the past came knocking. It started with a letter. A real letter envelope, stamp, handwritten name on the front. Ms. Amanda Rivers and Skylar Rivers. I froze. The last time I heard the name Rivers, my birth surname, spoken out loud by anyone other than Mom, I was 7. Mom looked at the envelope, eyes narrowing. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she made us tea and sat across from me at the table. "It's from your father," she finally said. I blinked. I thought he left us. For good. He did, she said, staring into her cup. But he never completely disappeared. Not from the shadows. That word, shadows, chilled me. We opened the letter together. It was short. "Amanda, I know I don't deserve this, but I want to see my child. I heard from an old friend that you've been making decisions without my consent. I want to talk. Face to face. Nathan." He didn't even use my name. Not Skylar. Not Noah. Just my child. As if I were property. As if I'd been altered like a defective toy. Mom's hands clenched the edge of the table. "He doesn't get to come back now. Not after vanishing. Not after this." But a part of me needed answers. So I said, "Let me meet him. Just once." The meeting was held in a neutral space, a counselor's office. He was already seated when I walked in, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he belonged in a courtroom drama. My father looked older than I remembered. Grayer. But his eyes, they hadn't aged a day. Still cold. Still scanning. He looked at me, jeans, blouse, soft curls framing my face, and blinked hard, like he'd seen a ghost. "This is not what I expected." I didn't flinch. "That makes 2 of us." He sighed. "I came to understand. Not to attack." I waited. He leaned forward. "But I do need to know the truth. Amanda, did you do this to our child?" Mom didn't say a word. She just reached into her purse, pulled out a folder, and tossed it on the table. Clinic records. Therapist letters. My own drawings, essays, and journals. My name change petition. Medical history. Hormonal assessments. Proof. Not that she had manipulated me, but that I had chosen this. And finally, she slid one more thing forward, a letter I had written months ago. Never meant to be shared, but I was glad she did. "I'm not broken. I'm not brainwashed. I'm just a girl who is waiting for the world to call her by her name." He read it. Every word. Then folded it shut. For once, he looked small. Like a man who had run too far, only to find the past waiting on his porch. We left without saying goodbye. I never heard from him again. But a week later, I got a package in the mail. Inside was a photograph, the last one taken of us as a family, before he left. And scribbled on the back, "You were always braver than me. Dad." Time passed. I grew. Physically, yes, my face softened, my voice settled, my figure blossomed with grace. But emotionally, I stepped into my skin with certainty. We visited the gender clinic again, this time, for more than therapy. I was approved for HRT legally. No more unlabeled pills from a hidden friend. I had full agency now. My name was Skylar on every form. And then came the twist that shook everything again. One morning, while rummaging through Mom's old storage for art supplies, I found a box marked, "For Skylar. When she's ready." Inside were dozens of envelopes. Letters written over years. All from Mom to me. Dated. Timestamped. Each one a record of every moment she knew, before I ever told her. One read. "Skylar smiled in the mirror today. She doesn't know her name yet, but her soul does." Another said, "I chose to give her blockers, not because I wanted a daughter, but because I saw one begging to be free. I cried for hours. Not because I was sad, but because I had never been alone. I was 17 when Mom passed away. It wasn't sudden. Cancer had crept in slowly, like a shadow slipping through the cracks. She'd kept it from me at first, not because she wanted to lie, but because she didn't want her illness to define our final year together. Even in her hospital bed, she still called me Skylar, my light, like it was a prayer whispered to the universe. Her final words to me? "You don't need me to become her anymore. She's already here." Grief is strange. I didn't cry at the funeral. Not really. I wore the floral dress Mom bought me on our first shopping trip together. I read one of her letters aloud, the one about the mirror and the day she first saw Skylar looking back. But inside, I was spiraling. I felt lost again. Untethered. No more tea at the kitchen table. No more whispered talks in the car during late-night drives. No more backup. Just me, the memory of her strength, and the unspoken promise I made at her bedside. I will not hide anymore. 3 years passed. I moved to the city. Got into college. Majored in gender psychology. Minored in fine arts. And slowly, I began mentoring kids who reminded me of younger me, anxious, isolated, full of questions no one seemed willing to answer. That's when I got an unexpected email from someone named Aiden Reyes. The name rang a bell. It took me a few hours before I remembered he'd been in my 8th grade math class. Sat 2 rows behind me. We'd never really spoken, but he wasn't one of the bullies. Just quiet. Observant. His message read, Skylar, I watched your school assembly speech on YouTube last night. I remembered you. I didn't know how to say this back then or even now, but thank you. You helped me more than you'll ever know. We started messaging, then video calls. Then we met in person when I visited my hometown to speak at a youth event. The moment we hugged, something clicked. Not romance, not yet. Something deeper. Recognition. Shared truth. Aiden was trans too. He'd come out 2 years after me. Said my name had been a whispered legend in the school halls for months after I left, not in cruelty, but in awe. You were the first person I ever saw choose themselves, he said. We talked for hours, late into the night. About family. Hormones. Dysphoria. Healing. Laughter. Grief. And eventually, about love. After the youth event, I stayed a few extra days in my hometown. Walked past the old school. The library where Mom used to work. The bench outside the grocery store where she bought me lip balm and told me I had a smile worth protecting. I visited the house. It was empty now. Sold. But the new owner, a kind woman with short silver hair, let me walk through for 10 minutes alone. In my old bedroom, the lilac one, I found something strange. Behind the baseboard, tucked into a gap in the wall, was a small envelope sealed with a wax stamp. My name was written on the front in Mom's handwriting. For Skylar, only when you're truly free. Inside was a letter. My Skylar. I have one final secret. The inheritance your father left when he vanished? It never disappeared. I protected it. Hid it. Grew it. And now it's yours. Not because of biology or birthright, but because you fought for your name, your soul, and your truth with more courage than most adults ever manage. There is an account in your name under Skylar. Fully legal. Ready whenever you are. Use it to build a life that makes you proud. You are my greatest creation. My best decision. Love always. Mom. That letter changed everything. I took the money. Not to escape, but to create. I opened a small center for LGBTQ+ youth, named the Mirror Room, a nod to the day I first saw my true self staring back. Aiden helps run it now. We offer art classes, therapy support, gender care access, HRT education. And sometimes, we just sit and listen. Because sometimes, that's all a kid needs, someone who sees them. And now, I still keep a picture of Mom on my desk. Some mornings I wake up and whisper, we made it. I look in the mirror, not to check my makeup or adjust my earrings, but to remind myself of something deeper. The closet wasn't locked. I just needed the courage to open it. And once I did, I never went back. A daughter, a dream, a legacy 10 years later. The Mirror Room buzzed with soft conversation and clinking coffee mugs. The sun filtered through the stained glass window panels Skylar had commissioned, a swirl of pink, blue, and white, forming a blooming chrysanthemum, her mother's favorite flower. It was a Monday morning, but the center was alive. A poetry group was gathering in one room. A mom nervously sat beside her child in the waiting area, who was clutching a brochure titled, You Are Not Broken, You're Just Beginning. Aiden stood near the front desk, helping a new volunteer set up the name tags for the weekly art therapy night. And in the heart of it all stood Skylar. Now 27, she carried herself with a calm grace, not performative, but lived in. Her voice had deepened slightly with age, but still held that same soft musicality people remembered from her early days at the mic. She wore a pendant around her neck, her mother's initials carved into the metal, and a tattoo along her wrist. She saw me before I saw myself. Later that evening, Skylar stood in front of a group of teens, all eyes on her. She told them the story, not the whole thing, but enough. Enough to let them know she understood what it felt like to hide, to be stared at, to question everything in the mirror. I used to think I was born broken, she said. But I wasn't broken, I was just becoming. And every one of you is becoming, too. A few kids teared up. One clapped. Then another. And then came the moment that always hit hardest, when someone asked, "What happened to your mom?" Skylar smiled gently. She became my blueprint, my shield, my compass. She paused. She raised a daughter, even when the world said she hadn't been given one. After the event, Skylar returned home to the house she'd rebuilt from her childhood, the same house where the lilac room still existed, though it had become a writing studio now. In the back hallway closet, the very one that started it all, she kept a sealed box labeled, "When you're ready, tell your story." Inside were printed drafts, video clips, her old journals, and even the pink notebook her mother had once written in. That night, Skylar added something new, a video recording of her speech and a note. "If someone finds this, know that you're not alone. You never were. Open the closet. Step into the light. And when you do, I'll be cheering for you." Outside, the moon glowed. And inside, Skylar sat by the window, sipping tea from her mother's old mug, staring at the stars. Not searching for permission. Just resting in peace. Because after all these years, she had finally become her mother's dream. And her own.